Good evening. I'd like to announce that this meeting will come to order. As most of you know, I'm your town moderator, Bob Hiss, and welcome to this special summer town meeting. Having been advised by our town clerk, Susan Galvin, that a majority of town meeting members are in attendance, I hereby declare that a quorum is present for the transaction of business, and this meeting is now open. In keeping with our tradition, we'll start our meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. Will the membership please join me in the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I would like to make just one brief announcement that since our last meeting just a short month ago in June, we was informed that one town meeting member and former planning board member has passed away, and that's Mr. Eddie Duffy. If you'll join me for a brief moment of silence in honor of Mr. Duffy's service to our town. Thank you. And one other member, I was just informed as well, Mr. Ted Hayes. Ted was a town meeting member, a member of the warrant committee. He was the chair of the warrant committee, and he was also a member of the town government study committee. So I'd like to also thank Mr. Hayes for his many years of service for our town. First, permission has been requested for certain members and personnel of the planning board and other boards, committees, and departments who are not town meeting members to attend with other members of their respective boards, committees, and departments upon the understanding, of course, that they will not vote. Hearing no objection from the body, and do we see any Q&A objections from the body? We see none. Such permission will be and hereby is accorded. Second, permission is granted to Milton Cable Vision to televise these proceedings. Also, please note that there are, we'll skip the point about the microphones. Thank you. So first order of business is we have to take up the motion to conduct this as a remote town meeting. So what I'll do is read the motion to conduct a remote town meeting and then ask someone to say so moved in the Q&A window and then ask for a second after that. So moved that the town of Milton conduct its 2020 special summer town meeting as a remote town meeting using the Zoom webinar technology as recommended by the town moderator and approved by the select board on Wednesday, July 19, 2020. Further, during the special summer 2020 remote town meeting, only the following rules will be modified to conform with the limitations of the Zoom webinar technology. Rule number 1 is replaced in its entirety by the following. First, town meeting members are required to register for a town meeting with the town clerk and join town meeting via a computing device by clicking on the town meeting link emailed to them in advance. The town clerk will confirm their registration as they are admitted to the remote town meeting. Town citizens and others who are not town meeting members will only be admitted to the remote town meeting with the prior permission of the moderator. Rule number 2 is modified as follows. Second, any town meeting member wishing to speak to any article or pending related matter will first click the raise hand button, and upon being recognized by the moderator will identify herself or himself by giving his or her name and precinct. If you have not been recognized by the moderator, you're not permitted to speak to the meeting. On occasion, members will informally alert the moderator that they desire to be recognized to speak on a certain article. While your moderator will attempt to remember who desires to be recognized on any article, please be advised that the only way in which a member can be sure to be recognized is to click the raise hand button and wait to be recognized. Rule 11 is modified as follows. 11th, upon a question being put to the town meeting, the moderator will first determine by electronic vote the sense of the meeting. The moderator will display and announce the results of the electronic vote. If the vote is doubted by 25 town meeting members clicking the raise hand button, then there will be a roll call of the meeting with the town clerk calling the name of each town meeting member in alphabetical order, and each town meeting member upon his/her name being called shall unmute their microphones and answer yes or no. I see we have a so moved by Mr. Daniel Clark. It's been seconded by Ms. Diane Agostino. Does anyone wish to speak to this motion? If so, please signify by clicking the raise hand button. I see we have a few members who wish to speak to this motion. Is that, if Mr. Schroth, if you do in fact want to raise your hand, can we unmute Mr. Schroth? Mr. Schroth, if you could unmute yourself. Perhaps he does not wish to speak after all. Then we'll go to Ms. Hayden. You wish to be recognized? You should, if you could unmute yourself. So last call, either Mr. Schroth or Ms. Hayden, if you wish to speak to this motion, please unmute yourselves. Otherwise, I will call for the vote. All right. Could we put up the polling question, please? All those in favor of the motion before the body, please signify by voting yes. All opposed, vote no. All abstaining, please vote abstain. And please remember to click submit at the end. We have no one on the phone, correct? Zoom administrators? We have 2 on the phone. Could we unmute the folks on the phone? All in favor on the phone of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Thank you. We can close the poll.
Oh, my goodness.
The motion carries at 98%. Thank you very much. I will now entertain a motion to continue to the rules as amended of our annual town meeting in June as the rules for this meeting. So again, in the Q&A, if someone could support that with a so moved. Brian Walsh says so moved. Stephen Rhines, could we have a second? Daniel Clark says second. I'll assume that, can we go to the poll for a moment? All in favor of the motion before the body, please signify by saying yes. All opposed, vote no. All abstaining, please vote abstain. Please remember to click submit at the end.
Aye.
Thank you. Opposed? I'll wait a few seconds for people to get time to vote.
Oh my gosh, so I can't get in.
Okay, we can close the poll. And can we mute the folks on the phone? The motion carries. Thank you very much. At this point, I would like to recognize Congressman Stephen Lynch, who has asked for permission to speak to the body. And could we unmute Congressman Lynch so we could say a few remarks? Congressman Lynch, are you there?
Hi, this is Shayna. I don't think that they've called in just yet. I will definitely notify you and let you know when they do call in, if that's okay.
Okay, very good.
Thank you.
Then can you open that, answer that question we have on in the Q&A?
Yeah, I guess.
Okay. In that case, we'll pause on Congressman Lynch. What I'd like to do now is recognize the leaders of the Fire Station Building Committee who have asked for a few minutes to deliver a presentation and update you on their work. So I'll recognize Brian Walsh and Dan Clark. So Mr. Walsh. And we'll put up the presentation so you can all see it at home.
Mr. Moderator, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Mr. Moderator, Brian Walsh, town meeting member from Precinct 8 and chairman of the Fire Station Building Committee. We have a brief presentation, and given the dynamics here of our Zoom meeting, I'd like to just turn it over to our Vice Chair, Daniel Clark, who will quickly walk us through the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. You're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Dan Clark, Precinct 10, Vice Chair of the Fire Station Building Committee. We just wanted to provide a quick update to this body and provide a chance to plug an upcoming design update meeting. It's been quite a bit of time since we last talked to this body and provided an update. So next slide. Our primary focus has been on headquarters in Atherton. Since we last met in December, we hosted community meetings to get input from different stakeholders. We've been working with the MIP, Master Planning Implementation Committee, additionally for the headquarters area to make sure that what our design is doing today works for the long term for that town center location. Separately, East Milton is on a different track as you look at this progression of where we're at. We're finishing up design development for headquarters in Atherton. East Milton is still in a early schematic design. We're reevaluating a few things on that and trying to identify what our best options are on that. And with both of these stations, we actually have a new fire chief, Chief Christopher Madden. So we're taking a little bit of time to go back and review things with him. He was part of the process previously, but now that he's the fire chief, we wanted to afford him the opportunity to go back and look at these plans and look at the East Milton options that are out there before providing an update to the community. Next slide. So I just wanted to preface this as this is kind of the pathway that we presented to the warrant committee back in December that we're hoping as a committee that we can take, which is continuing the design documents for headquarters in Atherton, really finalize a decision for East Milton in the direction it's going to go. The design is going to be behind that of Atherton and headquarters, but we want to keep the path going. We're hoping to then come to a fall town meeting, whenever that might be, to present an article for construction funding. This body previously gave us design phase funding, which we're working with right now, but we want to get construction funding for all three projects. If this body was to approve it, it does require a referendum vote within the town. And talking with Susan Galvin, we think we can target the April 21 election. And then hopefully a construction of likely headquarters first could happen summer, early fall of 21, best case scenario. Next slide. This is kind of a teaser to get people excited. We have some design update meetings coming up, the first one being September 15th, but this is the direction headquarters is going. This is a lot of input from MPIC, community stakeholders, the abutters, for headquarters. Material selections are no way final, but I wanted to present where we're at today to be open and candid. And we hope that we can get many people to come to our September meeting so that we can solicit additional feedback. Next slide. Similarly, this is to provide perspective for the Atherton station. You can see here on the images, it's pretty much similar to what you see today, except for in addition, similar materials, similar aesthetics, something that we believe fits within the neighborhood of Blue Hill and Brush Hill over there. Final slide. So that community meeting is most likely going to be virtual unless something significantly changes. We'll provide that information and publicize it on our website, on the Facebook page. It'll be a posted meeting. You can go to the town website to find that information. So, but if anybody has questions or wants to engage us, individually or set up in smaller group meetings for your precinct or your part of town, we're happy to engage. We're looking for the feedback sooner than later, especially for Atherton and headquarters. So with that, I'll turn it back over to the moderator.
Thank you, Mr. Clark and Mr. Walsh. Let me get my video back. Pardon me. There we go. So with that, we will proceed to Article 1. Let me explain what's going on now with Article 1 before we get into reading. Just so everyone can keep track, there have been some changes. So first, the article is printed in the warrant, has been modified now 2 times. All this content was sent out on Saturday and is now posted, has been posted to the town meeting page on the town website. So if you're to keep track, the warrant committee approved a green sheet to Article 1 a couple of weeks ago, and that was posted and sent to all of you in advance. And then just tonight, the warrant committee accepted some motions to amend to Article 1 that were recommended by the planning board. So that means there's a second green sheet. So if you're tracking at home, the content that you should have, and the warrant committee clerk is going to display this for us now, would be the document that was labeled Article 1 green sheet with planning board motion to amend. So that's the content before the body. Now, it's a very lengthy article. I think unless I see an objection in the Q&A to waive the reading of the article, I'm going to waive the reading of this article. And what I'd like to do is go to directly to April Anderson, who was the chair of the planning board, and then I believe she's going to recognize members of the board to speak directly, particularly Cheryl Tagayas. So if we could unmute Ms. Anderson. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Can you hear me?
Well, I guess we can. Please proceed.
Okay. This is April Anderson, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 2, Chair of the Milton Planning Board. Before we start to talk about our zoning articles, I just want to make a quick announcement to the town. As many of you know, our longtime planning director, Bill Clark, retired earlier this summer, and I'm pleased to announce that we have hired a new town planning director, Tim Zerwinski. Many of you may recognize the name. He was our prior assistant planning director some years ago, and we are thrilled to have him back to join our assistant planning planner, Allison Quinn, and our clerk, Julia Getman. And we have what we believe to be a dream team here in Milton, so we're very excited about that. So welcome, Tim. Earlier, when the pandemic first hit and the governor declared a state of emergency, there was legislation passed that provided planning boards across the state the ability to cease all operations. And I just wanted to take a minute to make sure the town meeting knows that we did not do that here in Milton. Very proud of the fact that the Milton Planning Board never missed a single regularly scheduled meeting. And I want to recognize my colleagues for their dedication to this planning process, not only in reviewing projects and making decisions and continuing with our citizen engagement, but also fine-tuning the zoning articles that you will see tonight. We also leaned very heavily on other committees that also were very hard at work during the pandemic: the Historical Commission, the Shade Tree Advisory Commission, and the Affordable Housing Trust, who also all weighed in on these articles before us tonight. So we thank them very much for their efforts. What you will see tonight is 5 articles sponsored by the Milton Planning Board. Cheryl Tagayas will speak to them. I hope that you find them to be very thoughtful and forward-thinking in our efforts to not only address some challenges that we have, but see that the business district, particularly the Milton Village Business District, is able to attract the highest and best uses for our community. These articles were prepared over a very long period of time. Article 1 has been under consideration for 3 or 4 years before both the Planning Board and the Master Plan Implementation Committee, and we are very proud of this effort moving forward, and we really hope that town meeting accepts these provisions. So with that, I ask the moderator to please recognize Cheryl Tagayas, who can give us a brief presentation on Article 1.
Thank you, Mr. Gaius. You are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, and thank you, Chair Anderson. If I could ask the Warrant Committee Clerk to put up the presentation, please. Okay. The area covered by this amendment is the business district of Milton Village. Milton Village is a part of Milton that has a long history dating back to the 17th century. In 1938, zoning was adopted in Milton, and for this area, it segregated uses, whereas historically, there were a mix of uses within the district. At this time, we're looking to go back to allow that mix of uses, and specifically to allow multifamily housing, which the current business district prohibits. This planned unit development is an overlay, and it provides an alternative to the existing building or existing business district, but it does not replace it. As April mentioned, since the publication of the warrant, the board received many comments and questions from town meeting members, and the board has worked with the warrant committee to incorporate questions and concerns and revisions that take those concerns into account. Next slide, please. Could we have the next slide, please? Okay, I'll ask one more time. Mr. Moderator,
Yes, it's
Is it
advancing in
possible?
our computer. It's frozen on Zoom. We're just looking into it.
okay, thank you.
Yep.
Okay, while we're looking into advancing that slide, well,
We're going to reshare. See if
Okay,
that
thank
solves the
you.
issue.
thank you.
Yep.
Excellent, thank you. Thank you for that. So the goals of the overlay remain the same as they were in the master plan of 2015. And what we really are looking to do is to enhance the character of the district by inviting new investment and economic opportunity that allows for mixed-use development. We think this mixed-use opportunity will strengthen the vitality of the district, providing places for goods and services, and the people who can help support those businesses. At the same time, we're looking to preserve the historic character of the district and provide new uses for historic properties, including multifamily housing, and within that multifamily housing, a range in the size and types of units, as well as affordable units. This reinvestment will strengthen Milton's tax base, and within this zoning, we think we've taken into consideration mitigation factors that during the special permit process can be employed. Next slide, please. We're having trouble.
Bill seems to be freezing on our side. Oh, we may have a solution.
Okay, thank you. Next slide. Okay, so the key provisions of this overlay. It requires mixed use with first floor commercial and residential up above. And in that residential, it requires a baseline of 12% of those units to be affordable and count towards the subsidized housing inventory. Those units would be required to be built on the development site. It also requires historic preservation, though it does allow the planning board to waive that requirement under certain conditions. It also includes many tools to control scale. This is one of the things that we heard most about over time, and we spent significant time studying those tools to make sure that they would have the scale control impact that we anticipated. Similarly, it incorporates design standards for the same reason. These design standards help to mitigate the scale differences between the buildings that are found within the district and provide for the kind of character that would be suitable in this historic part of town. We also include bonus incentives, and those apply only to properties that on Adams Street. And those incentives would be for historic preservation, for public improvements, and for an increase in affordable housing above the 12%. One of the challenges this district has is provision of parking, which the current business district has a large number of parking spaces required and has inhibited new development opportunities. We have right-sized the parking requirements as the minimum parking requirements in this district. with an opportunity to require additional spaces if we feel warranted. Any proposed development under this overlay is required to go through a rigorous approval process, special permit process with the planning board. Next slide, please. So with this article, we have an opportunity to plan for what Milton would like to see in this part of town. Too often, we find ourselves reacting to projects that do not meet our needs or fit the character of the town. Here, we can plan for the rejuvenation of this historic gateway to Milton that brings new life to historic buildings, that brings the potential for over 150 new residential units with as many as 30 new affordable units. And with that, brings potentially $500,000 a year in new revenue when built out. I kept this presentation short as we prepared a webinar, and we think that many of you took advantage of watching that webinar. And thank you to Milton Access Television for hosting that. And we also distributed a question and answer sheet, which answered many common questions with this zoning that we have heard through the last few years. Articles 2 and 3 are companion to Article 1. Article 2 establishes a revolving fund for public improvements within the district. And Article 3 establishes a revolving fund for historic preservation within the district. The goal of the revolving funds is to keep the bonus funds and improvements within the district itself. I'd like to note that a lot of people have contributed, as April noted, to the development of these articles. And we have garnered the support of many of the committees and boards along the way, including the Select Board, the Warrant Committee, the Master Plan Implementation Committee, the Historical Commission, and the Affordable Housing Trust. And we hope that we have garnered the support of you too, and we ask that you support these articles with a yes vote, and we are happy to take any questions at this time.
Thank you, Ms. Tagayas and Ms. Anderson. So, does anyone wish to speak to this article? Please signify by raising your hands. And I see Mr. Brian Furs, you're recognized. If we can unmute Mr. Furs.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Can you hear me?
Yes, very clearly. Thank you.
This is Brian Furs, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 10. Thank you to the Planning Board and for all of the groups that worked hard on this language over a number of years. I commend their efforts and applaud the intentions here and the overall work as well. I think this will go a long way towards creating responsible growth in our community, where we're under siege right now by 40V development with 4 projects basically proposing monolithic structures in what I would consider inappropriate ways. And these type of guidelines will allow developers to work with our town to add value to their properties, but do so in a responsible and guided way. So thank you again for the efforts of all of the people that have worked on this. It's much appreciated. I have 2 comments on the language, and we'll also be asking to make a minor amendment, which I would propose as a friendly amendment, but understand it may not be accepted that way. The first is just a comment and a caution. I caution that as written, the parking language is a bit troubling in that it essentially puts in an arbitrary standard for the planning board to increase the number of parking spaces required from 1 per 1,000 square feet to 3 per 1,000 square feet. And this arbitrary measure really requires all developers to really plan for that worst case scenario. So I hope that the spirit of the language is that will be only used when it's proven to be reasonable and necessary. And I do hope that this language will allow for good, responsible development and not create unnecessary parking and pavement in our community. The second is a quick comment, and again, what I'm going to offer as a friendly amendment. In section Looks like it is 3C, building height. There's language that's been struck that said the height of the ground floor the height of the ground floor shall be a minimum of 12 feet clear to encourage and facilitate the use of the space for retail or restaurant use. I'm guessing that language may have been struck in reflection of the language in 3B just above that says the footprint of buildings constructed, in that same language, last sentence, it says existing structures may retain their existing heights and number of stories. So I'm guessing that language may have been so that existing buildings, historic buildings, would not have to change their ceiling heights. But what I will tell you as a retail developer and someone that's worked in retail for over 20 years, to properly and I think or to properly activate the street in a way that I think we're trying to do here with active retail storefronts and not real estate offices and banks. 12-foot clear heights are really required to allow for proper ventilating, proper lighting, proper showcase of product. So I would encourage the board to take a friendly amendment to reinsert that sentence and add the following, for any new construction. And those 4 words would be inserted between ground floor and shall. So the final sentence would read as the height of the ground floor for any new construction shall be a minimum of 12 feet clear to encourage and facilitate the use of the space for retail or restaurant use. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Okay, let me see if I understand that change. So what you would like to do is which is on page 2 of the document that was sent out earlier, starts with section S, subparagraph 3, then section C, so it's on page 2. You want to take that second sentence, which was struck, and have it read, the height of the ground floor for any new construction, right?
That's correct, Mr. Moderator.
Okay. Shall be a minimum of 12 feet clear to encourage and facilitate the use of the space for retail or restaurant use. You'd like to leave the rest of the paragraph unchanged as modified.
Yes, that is correct. Thank you.
Okay. With that, why don't I just confer briefly with the planning board and see what their reaction is to this. By the way, could we also, if there is a second and someone wishes to second this motion to amend, please do so in the Q&A section. And there is a second, okay? If we just pause for a minute, let me go confer with the planning board and see what their views are. So, Mr. Furs, what I'd like to do is recognize the member of the Planning Board, Cheryl Tagayas, to respond to your friendly amendment with a suggestion. So, Ms. Tagayas.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Moderator. Member Furs, we had struck that from paragraph C because we have a paragraph F. And in looking at paragraph F, which requires 12 feet clear on Adams Street, but 10-foot clear elsewhere. But we'd like to suggest that we could, your friendly amendment, rather than be in paragraph C, be in paragraph F, and strike the words without a bonus floor.
I'm not sure if I'm still unmuted, but that.
You are still unmuted. Yeah, Mr. Furs, please.
Okay, Brian Furs, Precinct 10, town meeting member. That would be fine. I think that accomplishes the same goal, and I appreciate the consideration. Thank you.
Okay. So for the members, Mr. Furs is modifying his friendly amendment to remove the request he had on page 2, paragraph C, and instead go to the top of page 3, which is paragraph F. And I'll read what his friendly amendment would now accomplish. So the paragraph will read, the minimum ground story height in a new building on Adams Street shall be 12 feet clear, and the minimum ground story height in a new building elsewhere in the district shall be 10 feet clear. So his amendment deletes the 4 words without a bonus floor. That amendment has been accepted by the planning board as a friendly amendment. I'd also like to ask the warrant committee, Chair Asher, if you could confer with the warrant committee and render an opinion on the friendly.
We'll be happy to do that. Give us a couple minutes, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you. The warrant committee is just working through some audio issues on their vote. They'll be with us shortly.
Mr. Moderator, the warrant committee supports the amendment. I apologize for the delay.
Thank you, Mr. Asher. I appreciate it. Mr. Furs, thank you for your comments. Does anyone else wish to speak to this article as amended? I don't see any other raised hands. So with that, we'll go to the vote. Can we put up the poll, please? All in favor of the motion before the body, please signify by clicking yes. All opposed, vote no. All abstaining, please vote abstain. Please remember to click submit. Could we unmute the phones? No, this is just for everyone knows, this is not a motion to amend. So I'll restate it for the group. The friendly amendment modified the article in front of the body. So now we're taking the final vote on the article as amended by that friendly amendment, the removal of those 4 words. Excuse me, let me just talk to my Zoom host for a minute. Folks, let me just go on mute for a minute. I'm having trouble seeing the raised hands on my screen. That's why I went for the vote. So let me pause. Let's work this out.
It's too good to be true.
All right, we've resolved that small Zoom issue. I now see 4 members who have raised their hands. So I'll start by recognizing Brian Kelly. Mr. Kelly, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. My question for the planning board is the Bank of America property. Would that qualify for a bonus? Its frontage is on Elliott Street, and it is a historical structure. So was that the intent of the article? Are they aware of the location of that building as far as the bonus on Adam Street? So I just want to know if that was their intent, to exclude it from the bonus on Adam Street.
Stupid question.
Thank you. Perhaps we could mute the other members for a minute, and panelists, please. Okay. Well, Mr. Gaius, can you handle that question?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. That property has frontage on both Elliott Street and Adams Street, and therefore would qualify for a bonus incentive. It doesn't; those bonus incentives aren't granted automatically, though. They are granted at the discretion of the planning board.
Mr. Kelly, that answer your question?
I just, when I looked up the definition of frontage, it wasn't clear. It kind of, it led me to believe that it's on the main road onto which the plot or building fronts when I looked up the definition. So that's why I didn't know if it would meet the qualifications.
Okay, I'll take that as yes.
Fine.
All right. Mr. Earl Fay, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Earl Fay, Precinct 1. Just a comment, really. I appreciate the way the article is written and the affordable housing that in the special permit process. Yeah, this is the intent of town meeting to vote for this, and yet, if I understand things correctly, that could change in the special permit process, and I believe it has done so and will be addressed in other cases. It will be addressed later in town meeting. So I have a question. That is my question. Is there something that can be done to prevent a future change during the special permit process?
Understood. I will recognize Mr. Gaius again to answer that question.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. This would be in the zoning, and the planning board would not have an opportunity to waive that requirement within the zoning during the special permit process. the reference to others that we are looking at amending this evening, those zoning articles or those sections of the zoning code do allow for off-site affordable housing. But this one is specific and would not allow for that. So we're not looking, we would not be looking in the special permit process to change that because the zoning wouldn't allow us to. And the board has, in discussing these articles, has discussed that our intent with this and moving forward would be to require the affordable housing units to be built on site within the developments. But we do support that with the incentive for the increased affordability, that could be a contribution to a fund. But that would only be for the above the 12%. So that is a strategy that we think is important and would like to continue with going forward.
Thank you, Ms. DeGaius. Next, I'd like to recognize Melinda Collins, Chair of the Select Board.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Town Meeting Member, Precinct 9. The Select Board is extremely grateful to the Master Plan Implementation Committee and the Planning Board and the committees and many residents who participated in drafting and refining this zoning during its 3+ year journey. The board also wishes to thank in particular Cheryl Tagayas for her leadership, grace, and dedicated service as both the chair of the Master Plan Implementation Committee and until recently the Planning Board. Cheryl, we thank you for sharing your unique gifts and skills to bring this zoning alive with visual media and public engagement. By creating the smart growth transit-oriented PUD, the town is moving from a reaction-based zoning approach to one by which residents are able to look into the future at what their neighborhood could be, to a future that enriches the personal lives of residents and civic life of our town, while at the same time preserving the character that we all know and love. In addition, this PUD zoning promotes desirable redevelopment by giving property owners modern zoning tools that reflect today's needs, as well as a reliable process for both residents and property owners. As redevelopment is occurring throughout Milton, this PUD allows us to proactively shape development instead of reacting to it, as someone who alluded to 40Bs pointed out. So we can increase access to transportation, welcome new businesses, preserve the area's historic charm, improve public infrastructure, and create the diversity of housing, including affordable housing for downsizing elders and for up-and-coming young adults. The housing that we need at a scale that doesn't burden our community with oversized building projects. And the addition to the tax base is also much appreciated by the Select Board. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you, Ms. Collins. Next, I'd like to recognize Priscilla Hayden Sloan. Ms. Sloan, you're recognized.
Good evening, Priscilla Hayden Sloan, Precinct 10. I want to say thanks to the Planning Board for all their time and efforts. I just have a couple of questions that I wanted to clarify. In Section 3, number D, setbacks, I'm wondering about the 6-foot setbacks on the sides, particularly if a structure is being built up close next to one of the single-family or two-family homes that exist already within the district. And I raised that question because we live in a snug part of Milton ourselves, and our own house is only 6 feet from the setback of the property line, and our homes are only 2 stories, and it's pretty tight. When you look out the window, you're looking right in the kitchen of the next person. So I wonder about that. And then my other question is, in section 9 regarding the residents parking, again, living in a section of town with a lot of two families, what we have observed on our own street is there may be up to 4 cars per apartment in a two family. So some of our homes on our street now have 8 cars. So there's a lot of overflow onto the streets, even down onto Truman Parkway or over to the church parking lot across the way. So I wonder about that when we're building multifamily residences, if that trend, because you can walk to the train from where we live too, but that doesn't prevent people from having excess transportation in their own driveway. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hayden-Sloan. Mr. Gaius, can you reply to that question?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Moderator. On the first question relative to setbacks, the 6 feet setback from any side lot when the buildings aren't adjoining one another or not located on their property lines is common in a business district where you will have some buildings which share a party wall. And in this case, the underlying business district has the same requirement of 6 feet on the side lot lines. And we felt that 6 feet was appropriate. However, to address the concern that Ms. Sloan had, we did put in the design standards a requirement to step the building and address the massing when a building is located next to a historic structure such as the single-family homes. So this is something that would be addressed during the special permit process. And as to the second question relative to parking, the parking is one of the topics that generated much discussion. And I'd say nearly every meeting discussion. And there was a lot of research done and a lot of consideration given to this. And it's really important to understand that too much parking or increased parking really has ramifications. And it impacts our affordability, because to build that parking, especially in a district like this, is structured parking, and that drives up the cost of our housing. It also is, when you build more parking, you attract households who have more vehicles. What we're looking to do here is to actually decrease dependency on cars, to have mixed use, and to have people who want to locate in this area who will walk and take their bike and take public transit. And if a developer comes to us with a project and says, my market tells me that I need to provide more parking, then they can propose more parking. We're not setting a maximum parking here. We're merely setting a minimum parking that we think will allow for development that's not too expensive and have the district really benefit from its transit-oriented location.
Thank you, Mr. Gaius. I don't see any other hands raised, but I'll put out one last call. Does anyone else wish to speak to this article? Seeing none, we'll put up the poll, and I'll just remind the audience that during the course of the meeting, some of these articles will require a 2/3 vote. I'll announce what those are in advance. The others are just majority. Since this is a zoning bylaw change, it does require a 2/3 vote. So all those in favor of the motion before the body, please signify by voting yes. All opposed, vote no. All abstaining, please vote abstain. Please remember to click submit. Could we unmute the phones as well? On the phones, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Okay, we can close the poll. The vote is 89% yes, 11% no, 0% abstain. So I declare a 2/3 vote on Article 1. Thank you very much. We'll now proceed to Article 2. Now, Article 2 also has a green sheet. So this was an article that was sent out to you. I included in the distribution this weekend and up on the town website language that the planning board had recommended as an amendment. That language was accepted by the warrant committee tonight. And the warrant committee clerk is now going to put up the green sheet, which is now the official motion before the body. So what I will do is read that language. Recommended that the town vote pursuant to Chapter 44, Section 53E and a half of the Massachusetts General Laws to establish by bylaw a revolving fund for money received from applicants before the planning board pursuant to an application under the Milton Village Mixed-Use Plan Unit Development to support significant improvement to infrastructure and public amenities in the Milton Village Business District, consistent with the town's vision and improvement plans. To authorize the town administrator, after consideration of recommendations and cost estimates from appropriate department heads and after a majority vote of the planning board and the select board, to expend money from such fund only for the significant improvement to infrastructure and public amenities, including, but not limited to, wayfinding, historic plaques and markers, landscaping, parking, toilet rooms, power, water for farmers market and waterfront, boat, canoe, kayak, rowing, docks, benches, gazebos, etc., as may be envisioned in the town's improvement plans to determine the limit which may be expended from such fund during the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2020, and to act on anything related thereto. With that, does anyone wish to speak to this article? I see recognize Mr. Jim Coyle. Mr. Coyle, you're recognized.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I have one, Jim Coyle, Precinct 7.
Thank you.
Concern. When public amenities are built, no matter where they are, has been my observation, including East Milton and other towns and neighborhood, that the money seems to be never there to maintain them. So I'm going to propose one minor change here to give the planning board and select board some more leeway, and by on line 8, after significant improvement to, I like to add and maintenance of, and that's it. And just to, at least so it should be considered. Now I realize there was, that it's hard to know how big this pile of money is going to be at all, but I think some more leeway in how things are built out. I get one example. Let's say there's a bicycle rack that's on a public sidewalk. Who's responsible for maintaining that? I would not like to see additional stress put on other town budgets such as the DPW. So that's my suggestion. And I guess I'm doing that in the form of a possible friendly amendment. That's my concern. So.
Okay, understood. I see that's been made and there's a second. Let me just make sure we've got this right for all the members. So I'm reading the line that starts with the words "from such fund only for significant improvement to," and what you want to do is insert 3 words, "and maintenance of," so that line would read "from such fund only for significant improvement to and maintenance of infrastructure and public amenities, including, etc." Is that correct?
And that's correct.
Okay. Let's see if we can get the warrant committee clerk to represent that for us. And maintenance of. Okay. Then with that, why don't I give us, are you offering that as a friendly amendment? I think I heard that.
Yes.
Correctly? Then why don't I give the planning board a minute to confer among themselves, and I'll just check in and see what they think. Okay, thank you. I'd like to recognize Ms. Cheryl Tagayas, from the Planning Board. Mr. Tagayas.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. The Planning Board supports this and will accept it as a friendly amendment, but we would also advise that it needs to be added in line 10 in the same place, or in the same portion of the sentence where it would be after the word "to" and before the word "infrastructure."
Okay, 2 places. So this would be the other line that says significant improvement to infrastructure and maintenance of. Is that right? Can you read it exactly as it should read?
Yes.
There, I'm sorry, I'm catching up on my screen. So, Mr. Gaius, this is now displayed on the screen correctly?
Yes, Mr. Moderator.
Okay. So, that was Mr. Coyle. Mr. Coyle, does that represent your interest correctly?
Yes, yes, it does.
Very good. Okay, it sounds like the Planning Board accepts that as a friendly amendment. Warrant Committee, could you confer and please let us know your opinion of the friendly?
Mr. Moderator, we've begun the process. We'll be back to you shortly.
Thank you. Rub the spot flags real quick.
Mr. Moderator, George Asher, Town Meeting Member Precinct 6, Chair of the Warrant Committee. The Warrant Committee supports the change.
Thank you, sir. With that, does anyone wish to speak to this article as amended? I see Mr. Furs. Brian Furs, you're recognized.
Hi, Brian Furs, Precinct 10, Town Meeting Member. Very quick question for the Planning Board. On the document under the third to last line, as may be envisioned in the town's improvements plans. This is not capitalized, implying that it's not a defined term. I just wanted to know what the intent or spirit of this of the town's improvements plans refers to.
With that, I'll recognize Mr. Gaius.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. The Planning Board would like to say that it is not specifically a defined term on purpose, because plans and improvements may come. They may come at Milton Landing. They may come associated with the farmers market, with streetscape, and what have you, which we may not know about today. And so as plans develop, we think this gives the flexibility for those plans not to be specifically called for at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Geis. Does anyone else wish to speak to this article? Recognize Mr. Daniel Clark. Mr. Clark, you're recognized.
I just had a quick question about that friendly amendment. If the word "and" should actually be "or," with "and" implying that you're doing both.
I guess I will go back to the planning board now that it's their article and ask them that question. We'll let them confer for a minute, Mr. Clark.
Mr. Moderator, the board thinks that the word could be "and" or it could be "or," so we do not see the need to change it from what's proposed currently as "and."
Understood. With that, I'll move on to Mr. Pavlicek. Glenn Pavlicek, you're recognized.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Moderator. Glenn Pavlicek, Precinct 10. The article itself asks to determine what sum of money shall be expended during the fiscal year, and the recommendation actually just repeats that and doesn't say what sum of money should be expended during the fiscal year. So while it sets up the revolving fund, it doesn't set a limit for expenditure. And I would also add the final phrase, to act on anything related thereto, is part of the article, but really shouldn't be part of the recommendation because it just allows for a recommendation. Thank you.
So are you recommending, is that a question and a motion to amend?
I don't know what the spending limit would be or what they have asked to spend, but it seems to be there should be some spending limit there from if there are in fact going to be any receipts raised this year. If there are no receipts raised this year, then I assume the limit would be zero. But it would seem that if you're going to authorize a revolving fund, you have to determine an amount of money that you're eligible to spend from it. I would leave it to the planning board to ask what that might be.
Okay. And are you also suggesting, recommending that those last 6 words at the end of the recommendation be struck?
Maybe 7 words.
7 words, pardon me. Yes. And to act on anything relating thereto.
Yes.
Understood. Let me go briefly. Let's go to the planning board and see if they can answer the question on the funding. And then I think they'll have an answer to accept as a friendly amendment, I assume, striking those last 7 words. Mr. Geis, do you have an answer for us? You need to confer a bit more.
Mr. Moderator, my understanding is that Member Mullen has offered an amendment that would take care of striking the "and" to act on anything related thereto, and that he also offered an amendment to that section or that sentence which describes the limit. Which
if we just haven't heard from Mr. Mullen tonight.
Yeah, so would Member Pavlicek, I guess, wait to hear the proposed amendment from Mr. Mullen before deciding what to do about these 2 questions?
No problem at all. Thank you very much.
Sounds like he will. Very accommodating. Okay. Mr. Mullen, I see your hand raised. You're recognized. Mr. Mullen, can you unmute yourself? There you go.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Peter Mullen, Precinct 2. I actually have two proposed amendments to the recommendation, both of which I think could be accepted as friendly amendments. I believe in the currently revised recommendation on line 7, where it says, after a majority vote, I would propose inserting the word both, the planning board and the select board. My understanding is that that is the intent of the planning board, that you'd have to get a majority vote of both boards, each board, in order to expend funds. I think it's vague without that, and you could actually not have a majority of one board, but have sufficient votes in the other board to create a majority of the two combined boards. The other proposed amendment I would have would be to delete the words at the end of the article that are lined out there, and to substitute in their place, and to set a limit. And I wonder if we can just move the screen up a little bit. And to set a limit of $0, which may be expended from said fund during the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2020. We're now in that fiscal year. We would have to adopt this bylaw tonight. We'd have to get it approved by the Attorney General. And then if we had some developers that were interested, they'd have to apply to the planning board. I don't expect we're going to have any funds in this revolving fund this year. And if we do, we can certainly wait until after July 1st of 2021 in order to spend them. So I think a zero appropriation is appropriate.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mullen. I'll read that back for the audience. So if we go back to the article as it has been started as a green sheet and now been amended, I'm going to count down 7 lines to the line that starts with the word department heads. So the first of Mr. Mullen's changes are department heads, and after a majority vote of both the, so inserting both between vote of and the planning board. That's the first. And the second is to delete the 7 words at the end and to act on anything relating thereto, and substitute the language as you see on the screen down below, which would say, and to set a limit of $0 which may be expended from such fund during the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2020. And it sounds like the planning board is interested in accepting that as a friendly amendment. So I'll pass the baton to Ms. Cheryl Tagayas. Could you reply back to your thoughts on that as a friendly amendment?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. The planning board will accept these changes or amendments as friendly amendments, but we do want to be clear that we think that funds that are collected into these accounts should be expended, and as they come in, and that can be addressed in future town meetings when we're looking at approving expenditures from revolving funds. Thank you.
Understood. So we have Mr. Mullen's friendly amendment accepted by the submitting board, the planning board. Warrant committee, could you confer and tell us your opinion?
We've begun the process, Mr. Moderator. I'll be back to you in short order.
Thank you.
Mr. Moderator, George Asher, Chair, Warrant Committee, Town Meeting Member Precinct 6. The Warrant Committee supports the amendment.
Thank you very much. So this has now been, this article has now been amended with friendlies twice. I'd like to see if anyone else wishes to speak to this article as amended. I see no further hands. With that, if we could put up the poll. All those in favor of the motion before the body, please signify by voting yes. All opposed, vote no. All abstaining, please vote abstain. Please remember to click submit at the end. And can we open up the phone lines for folks on the phone? All in favor on the phone, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Thank you. We can mute the phones. Okay, we can close the poll. This article passes 94% yes, 5% no, and 1% abstain. It was a majority vote, so it clearly passes. Thank you very much. We can close the poll, and we'll move on to Article 3. Article 3, recommended that the town vote pursuant to Chapter 44, Section 53E1/2 of the Mass General Laws to establish by bylaw a revolving fund for money received from applicants before the planning board pursuant to an application under the Milton Village Mixed-Use Planned Unit Development to support historic preservation activity in the Milton Village Business District, to authorize the town administrator, in consultation with recommendations and cost estimates from appropriate department heads, and after a majority vote of the planning board and the select board, to expend money from such funds for the preservation of town-owned historic properties within the district or the purchase of historic properties within the Milton Village Business District, and to authorize the town administrator, after consultation with the historical commission and after a majority vote of the planning board and the select board, to expend money from such fund in the form of grants or zero interest loans. In exchange for the grant or the zero interest loan, a property owner could be required to convey a preservation restriction to the town and to act on anything related thereto. This was submitted by the planning board. Does anyone wish to speak to this article? And I see Mr. Mullen, you wish to speak. You are recognized, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Peter Mullen, Precinct 2. I wonder if we could have up on the screen the revised recommendation. I believe we want to do the same thing here we just did in the last article. With regard to, I guess it's the 5th line where it says majority vote of, I'd propose inserting the word both the planning board and the select board. That comes up again 3 lines down where it says after majority vote of both the planning board and the select board. In the next to the last line with regard to in exchange for grants and zero interest loans, I would suggest substituting the word may for the word could with regard to requiring a preservation restriction. And I would propose that last proposed change of preservation restriction to, I would that's a mistake. I'd rather keep the word the there, to the town. And I would propose to delete the semicolon after the word town and the rest of the language, the 7 words about to act on anything related thereto.
Understood. So this is a motion you're putting before the body, and
I believe it might be a friendly amendment acceptable to the planning board and the warrant committee.
I believe you're right. Let us just ask the planning board, because I think the language is clear on the screen. But why don't I just read it for the audience, just because I think we've got some folks on the phone and I want to make sure They've got it. So this is on page 40 of your warrant. If you go down to line 8, where it says, starts with department heads, that would now read department heads, and after a majority vote of both the, so that's the same change we made in Article 2. Again, I'm going to go 5 more lines down to line 13, which is, starts with the words historical commission, so that would now read historical commission, and after a majority vote of both the planning board. The third change is in line 16, where right now it reads interest loan, a property owner, and you want to replace the word could with the word may. And then lastly, in line 17, where it says preservation restriction to the town, you would now delete the semicolon and the 7 words and to act on anything relating thereto. And that's what's represented, I believe, on the screen.
Right. I think on the screen we need to delete the semicolon after town and leave the period in.
That's correct. Very good. Okay. I see there's also been a second. Thank you, Ms. Agostino. Planning board, do you have need to confer, or do you have an opinion on this friendly amendment?
Mr. Moderator, the planning board accepts these friendly amendments.
Very good. Thank you. Warrant Committee Chair, Mr. Asher, could you confer?
Mr. Moderator, the warrant committee is in consultation right now. We'll be back to you shortly.
Thank you. If the members are wondering why the warrant committee conference takes a bit of time and some of the others are quicker, the select board is all co-located here in the Council on Aging, as is the planning board, but the warrant committee is scattered hither and yon, and you can't hold 2 Zoom calls on one computer. So they have some alternate technology they're using to confer amongst themselves so they can get back to us with the vote.
Mr. Moderator, George Asher, town meeting member, precinct 6, chair warrant committee. The warrant committee unanimously supports the recommendation change.
Thank you very much, Chair Asher. Mr. Mullen, thank you for your contributions. Does anyone else wish to speak to this article as amended? I see no further hands being raised, so we'll call for the poll. By the way, this requires a majority vote. All those in favor of the motion before the body, please signify by voting yes. All opposed, vote no. All abstaining, please vote abstain. Please click submit at the end of your vote. Could we unmute the phones? All those on the phone in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Thank you. We can mute the phones. Okay, we can close the poll. So the motion carries with 95% yes, 4% no, and 2% abstain. Thank you very much. We'll now proceed to Article 4. Recommended that the town vote to amend Section 10 of the general bylaws, known as the zoning bylaws, in Section 3, subsection 1 as follows. In subsection 3, add the following after paragraph D. Affordable housing units. In a Milton Village Central Avenue Business District planned unit development, 12% of the total housing units computed to the nearest whole number shall be affordable housing units, subject to perpetual deed restrictions. And if applicable, a regulatory agreement ensuring permanent affordability. Should the calculation result in a remainder of 0.5 or above, an additional on-site unit shall be required. Should the remainder be below 0.5, a contribution to the Affordable Housing Trust shall be required in an amount to be determined by the Planning Board. These units shall be affordable to households whose annual income shall not exceed 80% of the then current area median income for the Boston, Cambridge, Quincy metro area, as determined by the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD, adjusted for household size, and these units shall qualify for the inclusion in the subsidized housing inventory, SHI, maintained by the Massachusetts Department of Housing and Community Development, DHCD. All affordable units shall be integrated with the rest of the development and shall be comparable in design, floor area, number of bedrooms, appearance, construction, and quality of materials, with market rate units to the maximum extent permissible by law or regulation. Preference shall be given to Milton residents and employees of the town of Milton in the rental or sale of affordable units. A special permit issued under this section shall state that final occupancy permit shall not be issued until the affordable housing restrictions, and if applicable, the regulatory agreements have been recorded with the Registry of Deeds, and copies of the recorded documents have been provided to the Planning Board and the Building Commissioner. Does anyone wish to speak to this article? Mr. Edward Corcoran, you're recognized.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. Ned Corcoran, Precinct 3, and I am also counsel to the two property owners of owners of the two properties that are located within this district. They are the property that contains the 88 Wharf Street development and the 2 Adam Street, which is the extra space storage property. So I need to recognize that I am representing each of those in different capacities before the town.
Thank you for doing so.
And I have two proposed amendments. The first of which is a request, the motion to refer this back to the Planning Board for further study. The second would be more specific to the language of the bylaw if that first motion is not accepted. And I can speak to that now or wait for a second.
So your first motion is to refer this back to the Planning Board?
Yes.
Okay. We have a motion to refer this back to the Planning Board. Is there a second? I see a second. Okay. So by the way, I think I made a slight error. I wanted to recognize the Planning Board early on, but I think I'll have the opportunity to do so now. So Mr. Gaius, I'll recognize you as the first speaker at the moment on the motion to refer back to the Planning Board.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. The Planning Board does not support sending this back for further study. We had been asked to do that, I think, on 2 occasions since this article was first submitted. And in going back to explain the intent of the article, this existing PUD, which, as Mr. Corcoran said, applies to properties that are over or 80,000 square feet or over. And there are only 2 parcels currently that meet that standard. It's the zoning that 88 Wharf was built under, and that zoning has no requirement for affordable housing. And so it's a lost opportunity. And here we are looking, we just passed an overlay district which requires 12% affordability, and the lots that applies to are 4,000 square feet and above. And now we have an opportunity for a larger lot to build many more units and not provide any affordable units. The Planning Board feels strongly that a 12% requirement should be applied to this district, and we'll be looking at applying it to more districts in the town. We are in a position of needing to address our shortfall of affordable housing, and this is one of the tools to help us get there. So we strongly oppose the motion to send back for further study. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone else wish to speak to the motion to refer this back to the planning board? And I see Ms. Collins. Could we promote Ms. Collins to a panelist as the chair of the select board so she can be seen? Ms. Collins, temporary pause while we get you there. Okay, you're a panelist. You can turn on your video, Ms. Collins. And then speak when ready.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Town meeting member, precinct 9. The select board is not in favor of referring this back for the reasons that Ms. Chagayas just enumerated. So we support the article going forward.
Thank you. Does anyone else wish to speak to the motion to refer?
Mr. Moderator, may I speak?
No one else has offered to, so yes, you may.
Thank you. I've raised this motion, and I raised it at the public hearing with the planning board, and I raise it now because unlike the work that was just done over the last 3 years with respect to Article 1, this was a somewhat last-minute introduction of a change to a bylaw that spent a significant amount of time being developed over 15 years ago. This bylaw came out of the fire that destroyed the old Hood freezer storage plant down on the wharf. It resulted in a bylaw that produced beautiful building, the 88 Wharf building, and went into permitting for development at 2 Adams Street. I represented that development through 2 years of permitting with state, local, and federal levels of permits to produce units in 2 old mill buildings and a building that was permitted but not built because of the 2009 economic downturn. As the planning board indicated earlier, the development of these overlays is all about creating a bylaw that addresses a balance.
Mr. Corkin, we're having trouble hearing you.
Okay. As planning board outlined earlier, the development of these overlay districts take a lot of effort and consideration, and they have to balance competing interests of density, parking, a mix of uses, affordability, and other issues. We have no issue with the introduction of affordability if those other issues are also determined and evaluated at the same time. The overlay district, in Article 1, speaks to a minimum of 1 parking space per unit, for a residential unit. This bylaw, the original overlay district, requires a minimum of 2 parking spaces per unit. The building that was in both 88 Wharf and the building that was permitted but not built in front of the extra space storage building, that required significant amount of structured parking. Structured parking spaces cost approximately $30,000 per space to build. That's an enormous cost to account for in a development. In this case, the units that would be sold in the development at the extra space development, they permitted only 14 residential units. There's a restaurant, there's other retail space that were required, and significant volumes of parking. If we account for the 12%, we're rounding the number of units required at 12% would be 2 affordable units. These units would typically sell for somewhere between $750,000 to $1.25 million in today's dollars. Affordable units will be sold at less than $250,000 per unit. That means in a small development with 14 units, a developer would have to absorb approximately $1 million to $1.5 million in loss of revenue without any modification to the parking count that he would have to produce to develop the building. My point is, we have no issue with affordability, but it ought to be repurposed, taking into account the other development costs and implications that go with the development. The extra space storage property contains 80,000 square feet plus, but it's got an enormous building that takes up most of the site, which is the extra space storage building itself. There are two other small mill buildings that contain 7 units, and there's about 50,000 square feet of land that is not capable of being developed at all because it is a rocky knoll outcropping overlooking the river, and in fact was deeded into permanent conservation as part of the permit process that went through in 2006 to 2008. The last point on that is that in the conjunction of the development of that permit, the planning board requested and the developer agreed to make a $50,000 payment to the town for affordable housing purposes. I have not been able to clarify whether or not that payment was made. I have reason to believe that it was because there were a number of other requirements, including the development of a pocket park, public access to the river, public access to the MBTA station, all of which were developed and paid for and construction and developed at the time that the building permit was issued for the new building that was never built. This development arrived at a building permit that was ready to go with a groundbreaking that took place in early 2009 and just wasn't built. So I think that the planning board ought to go back and review the entirety of this bylaw when it accounts for affordability. And how does this accounting of affordability stand with respect to the other components of development? Not opposing affordability. I think it ought to be done in the larger context of development of that bylaw and all of the other implications that go with it. So for that reason, I would ask the body to refer this matter back to the planning board for full study of the implications of the addition of an affordability component to this bylaw. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Corcoran. Some other hands have popped up. Mr. Coyle, I'd recognize you, please.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Jim Coyle, Precinct 7. I oppose sending this back to the planning board. I think they and many others have done a Herculean effort to put all of the sequence of articles together, and we should go with their recommendations. I think this is, and the work that's been done here, I'm hoping will be very helpful for the area in East Milton, to that we can have some orderly development, and this is a great model for everything that they've done is just tremendous, and I really like the overall approach has been very coherent, and it all fits together quite well. And I think it's important to keep Article 4 along with the previous articles so they're all passed as a set. I believe that was the intention originally by the Master Plan Committee and the Planning Board. So I vote that I would vote that we do not send this back to the Planning Board at all.
Thank you, Mr. Coyle. Next I see April Anderson, Chair of the Planning Board. Ms. Anderson, you're recognized.
Thank you, Moderator Hiss. April Anderson, Precinct 2, Town Meeting Member, Chair of the Planning Board. I just want to make a quick comment in response to Mr. Corcoran's plea to send this back. Obviously, the Planning Board does not support this motion, but I want to remind Town Meeting, we have 5 separate 40Bs pending before us now. The change that we're making to this bylaw, that we're proposing to make to this bylaw, is very, very simple. All it does is include an affordability component to an existing bylaw that happens to be adjacent to the bylaw we just accepted in Article 1 with a consistent provision. If Mr. Corcoran has a project he wishes to bring before the Planning Board, we would be very excited to hear more about that. And if he has a proposal to do a more comprehensive rewrite to this overlay, we're also very happy to talk about that. But I think the issue at hand right now is consistency and housing affordability. And I think not acting on this article is putting every neighborhood in Milton at risk. And I would ask us not to send this back to the planning board. We don't need more study. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Next, I'd like to recognize Mr. Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Leroy Walker, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 10. This is actually a question for you, Mr. Moderator, and for Town Council. It's with regard to a point of order, which is in the case where a town meeting member, in this case, Mr. Corcoran, is also counsel to property owners that might either be harmed by a particular motion or benefit from a particular motion. My point of order question is whether that town meeting member could even make a motion with regard to the article, or whether they would need to recuse themselves. They could certainly speak to the article on behalf of their client, but I question whether they could make a motion that would be beneficial to their client.
It's an important point, Mr. Walker. Why don't I confer with Town Council in just a moment and be right back. So, Mr. Walker, I did confer with Town Council, and what I'll refer you back to are the rules of our town meeting, which are part of the bylaw. And there's a rule number 4, which I'll just read, which I think answers your question. It says, fourth, any person having a monetary or equitable interest in, or who is employed as an attorney or otherwise by another person interested in any matter under discussion shall disclose the fact of his or her interest or employment before speaking thereon. And Mr. Corcoran, in my opinion, complied with that rule early on by not only announcing his town meeting elected role, but also disclosing the fact that he was representing others and thus had a monetary interest. So I think it's permissible for him to both speak and to offer motions on the floor. And Town Council agrees. Mr. Walker, you're muted. Does that make sense?
It does. So Town Council's opinion is that a town meeting member who is also counsel to a particular client could make a motion that's beneficial to the interest of that client.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I can have Town Council speak if you like, but we just conferred in.
No, if you talk to him, that's fine. Thanks.
Okay. Very good. Mr. Earl Fay, you're recognized. Mr. Fay, would you like to speak? I see your hand raised. You're on mute.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Earl Fay, Precinct 1. I applaud the planning board for moving forward with a 12% number back in our previous article and here as well. We've been asking for that for quite some time, and the rounding as outlined by Mr. Corcoran is precisely the problem, is that we've been bullied in the past to prevent such a round up to a unit, and we are where we are. So I think it's about time to recognize that, and I do applaud the planning board for moving forward with 12%. It absolutely should not be referred back And so I would urge a no vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fay. I don't see any other hands raised. I'll just make sure that that's the case. No, another hand just popped up. Mr. Michael Mahalchek, you're recognized.
Hi, I was just wondering, I'm sympathetic to moving on and to keeping the affordability component there, but I think Mr. Corcoran said something that made sense to me, that if there's a requirement in this particular district that was permitted a long time ago to have 2 parking spaces, and we add a requirement for 12% affordability, we should say something about reducing the requirement for parking spaces, which is also a goal in the new district that we just approved. And I just wonder if the planning board had any ideas about putting something in this article now that would address what Mr. Corcoran said about the expensive 2 parking places per unit and reducing that.
Understood. We'll hand that over to the planning board to see if they can confer and reply. Ms. Anderson, is that for you or for Mr. Gaius? Or do you wish to confer first?
Kathleen O'Donnell is going to respond for us.
Ms. O'Donnell, you're recognized. You just have to unmute.
Yes,
there you go.
I did. So I'm Kathleen O'Donnell, planning board member and precinct 7 town meeting member. I would remind everybody that there is already construction under a special permit that was issued under this bylaw ages ago. The Mr. Corcoran's client can build what was permitted without any issue at all. He wouldn't have to do the 12%. It wouldn't apply to him. He's already got this permit and it can already be exercised. So we're only just talking about something that if a new project comes in, and at that point, if he has a new project, he could come before us and address the parking issue at that point in time and ask for a reduction on the basis of the fact that he has to provide 12% of affordable housing. Many of the things that he's mentioned, that sort of amenities that were being provided, I would remind everybody that this property is under a Chapter 91 license, and all of those kinds of public amenities are a requirement for when you build on when you build on filled land. So there's all kinds of things that are in this special permit that would go forward when and if there is a program that's presented to us, a new development and a new idea, we could take a look at the parking and anything else.
Thank you, Ms. O'Donnell. Next, I see Ms. Virginia King. Ms. King, you're recognized. Just need to unmute on your end.
I agree with what Ms. O'Donnell said. Also, you know, this permit I think was given in 2009 and it hasn't been completed for some unknown reason. You know, if you were to get a permit or a variance from the Board of Appeals, which I'm on, that right goes away after a year unless you petition to have that kept open. The building must be completed within a year. So, you know, Mr. Cochran's client is quite lucky that he has, you know, the ability to do what he wants to do, even if he doesn't like the 2 cars allowing, 2 parking spaces allowed. So, so Kathleen actually said a lot of what I wanted to say. And so I don't really need to keep that hand up, but I just wanted to mention that, you know, if you sit on a permit for 11 years, you know, it's kind of asking us to approve something that might, or continue to approve something that might not be in the plan of this area right now. So either hang on to what you got or try to do something that's better for your client, but that's not our issue today, is it? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. King. Ms. O'Donnell, your hand is still up. Do you have anything else to reply from the planning board, or did you want to drop your hand? You wanted to drop your hand?
I just dropped my hand.
Very good. I see no other individuals, no members wishing to speak to this motion to refer. In that case, can we put up the poll? So I'll remind the body what we're doing is we are conducting a motion to refer this article back to the planning board. That's a majority vote. So with that in mind, all those in favor of the motion before the body, please signify by voting yes. All opposed, vote no. All abstaining, please vote abstain. Please remember to click submit. If we can unmute the phones. On the phones, all in favor of the motion to refer, please signify by saying aye. All opposed, no.
No.
Thank you. We can mute. I'll give it 5 more seconds to conclude the voting. Okay, we can close the poll. The motion fails. The yeses are 22%, the noes are 76%, and the abstains are 1%. So the motion does not carry. With that, we're back to the main recommendation from the warrant committee. If we could close the poll. And I see Mr. Corcoran, you're the only hand raised. You are recognized to speak back to the main recommendation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. Again, Ned Corcoran, Precinct 3, and I am again disclosing my representation of the 2 property owners within this overlay district. My second motion is what I prepared and sitting was just on the screen relative to buildings to make it clear that this bylaw is prospective only and doesn't apply to buildings that have already been constructed and or buildings that were already permitted but have not been constructed. And so I've included language that would say that a building that was substantially renovated or repurposed for residential uses as of July 1, 2020, but not including a building that is substantially similar to a building that was permitted prior to said date. And the reason I say substantially similar is that the building that was permitted in 2008 was designed under a building code that is 2 building codes out of date. The new building code requires, the new building code would require interior modification to the building, would not require modification to the program that was permitted, the number of units that were permitted, but would require a redesign, at least with respect to fire egress within that building. And so what I'm asking is the body to recognize that buildings that exist and or buildings that were permitted through a substantial multi-layer permitting process be grandfathered by the existing bylaw and not be subject to the requirement for the 12% of total 12% in the units to be built within that building, because that permit does account for parking. It did account for a $50,000 payment to the town, which I believe was made. I haven't been able to nail that down either through the town or through Extra Space. But my understanding is that $50,000 payment was made, would have been made as part of the requirement for the issuance of the building permit when the building permit was issued. I will hope to clarify that. So it's simply the purpose of this proposed amendment is to accept the status quo with respect to permits that were issued prior to the effective date of this bylaw. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Corcoran. So I'll just make sure the body understands. So Mr. Corcoran was kind enough to submit this in advance in writing. And what he's done is he has inserted into your article in the second line after it's the line that says business district plan unit development. He's inserted the following phrase, in a building construction or substantially renovated and repurposed for residential use after July 1, 2020, but not including a building that is substantially similar to a building that was permitted prior to said date. And he's also then added in the words after housing units in such building. Is there a second on this motion? Let me scroll down. By the way, just let me interrupt for a minute. I see there's now a second on the article. Thank you. Host, if you could handle the question that's come in. All right, so we have a motion to amend that's been made and seconded. I'd like to recognize Cheryl Tagayas of the Planning Board. Mr. Tagayas.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I just want to be clear that the Planning Board did speak with Town Council at the time that this was drafted, and Town Council advised that that this bylaw does not require a clawback on an already built building. So part of this amendment is unnecessary. The second thing I would like to say is that the comment about the building codes is not relevant really to the zoning, because building codes change more frequently than zoning codes in my experience. And it's the schematic level of design that we're looking at in the special permit process. And it's not the detailed level that the building codes require related to the type of construction, or in a building like this, you would have a sprinkler building. And so regardless of whether the building code change from year to year. So the relevancy of that is just not really well-founded. And then lastly, I'd like to say that the building that was permitted 11 years ago, as was pointed out, had, I think, a restaurant of about 135 seats. And I think it was 14 units of 2-bedroom condominiums that were large-sized units. If that development were to continue to go forward, as has been said, it could go forward. But the likelihood that that development would want to reconsider that program mix is high. And if that program mix shifted to a smaller restaurant, it would still need to have public amenities. So as Kathleen O'Donnell mentioned, that program mix is something I'm sure will need to be studied moving forward. Also, given this location, the large condominium units may end up being something that gets looked at, and maybe there will be smaller units with less need for parking. And our Article 1 requires 1 parking space per unit. And if they switch to 1-bedroom units, then they'd be consistent with that parking under the current parking. So it's really not necessary for us to go back with this amendment and tying it to a particular special permit built 11 years ago. The program is going to change. We're pretty confident, given Mr. Corcoran's comments, and the 12% affordability should apply to a new program. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Does anyone else wish to speak to this motion to amend? I see no other hands raised. So with that, we will put up the poll.
Mr. Moderator, I'm sorry.
Yes, Mr. Corcoran, you do get another bite at the apple since no one else had their hand raised, so please go ahead.
Thank you. So it is highly likely there are 2 options for redevelopment of this site. One is to build a building that was already permitted with a 135-seat restaurant, 1,000 square feet of retail, other educational space, and 14 units. The current bylaw says that there should be a minimum of 2 parking spaces for each residential unit, or such greater number as the planning board may determine is reasonably necessary. We'd need to go to the Board of Appeals for a variance if we're going to vary the parking requirement, or come back to town meeting for a further amendment to the bylaw to address the parking issue. So because the process that I went through 14 years ago went through significant process with the town, with 2 permits with the planning board, with Chapter 91 license, DEP was the entity that required the restaurant to be built as a condition of the development of the 2 mill buildings. The easiest permitting process to go through is to go back through the planning board to re-permit the same building. And all I'm asking for in this case is to codify that process, that if that is the process that the developer decides to go through, that process is already acceptable. The other change would be significant. If there's a significant other change that has more units with more 1-bedrooms and other things, we'd have to come back and reevaluate density, parking, the mix of uses, other things. That would require a wholesale reworking of the bylaw before you could move forward to a special permit. It would require going back to DEP for a significant amendment to the Chapter 91 license and other things. And all I'm trying to do is to clearly codify the fact, the advice that we're getting now from Ms. O'Donnell and apparently town council, that if I just come back and design and build the same building, then I don't have to worry about it. I'm not sure that that's clear. And what I'm asking for is clarity. And this gives clarity. And if there's going to be a change, and if it's going to be a significant change, then it's going to be a wholesale change to the bylaw, because that would be necessary in order to allow a different development to occur. So that's the purpose of this amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Corcoran. Ms. Anderson of the Planning Board, you're recognized.
Thank you. April Anderson, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 2, Chair of the Planning Board. Again, Planning Board rejects this amendment. We do not support it. And with all due respect to Mr. Corcoran, Town Meeting is not here to create a path of least resistance for his applicants. We are here to make good policy decisions on behalf of the town. And what the Planning Board recommends is 12% affordability be included in this bylaw to remain consistent with the other bylaw that we adopted this evening. So we ask that Town Meeting please reject this amendment.
Thank you, Ms. Anderson. So before going to a vote, do we have an opinion of the warrant committee on this motion to amend?
Mr. Moderator, George Asher, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 6, Chair Warrant Committee, we are conferring and will respond in short order.
Thanks. By the way, while the warrant committee is conferring, one of the members has sent in a question that the Zoom host alerted me to about scope. And I did confer with town council in advance of this town meeting. And since the language in the article, in the amendment rather, actually narrows the scope rather than expands it, that I believe that this amendment is within the scope of the article by that very definition. So I believe the amendment is appropriate in that regard. But thank you for raising the point.
Mr. Moderator, George Asher, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 6, Chair Warrant Committee, apologies for the delay. Unanimous rejection of the amendment by the Warrant Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Asher. With that, we'll proceed to we'll proceed to vote on this amendment. So it requires just a simple majority. If we could put the polling question up. All of those in favor of the motion before the body, please signify by voting yes. All opposed, vote no. All abstaining, please vote abstain. Remember to click submit. If we could unmute those on the phone. All those on the phone in favor of the amendment, please signify by saying aye. Opposed, no.
No.
Thank you. We can mute the phones. I think we can close the poll. The yeses are 24%, the noes are 73%, the abstains are 3%, so the motion to amend fails. So with that, we're back to Article 4 as written in your warrants. If we can close the poll. Does anyone else wish to speak to Article 4? I see no other hands raised. So with that, if we could put up the poll, this does require a 2/3 vote as it's a zoning bylaw change. All those in favor of the motion before the body, please signify by voting yes. All opposed, vote no. All abstaining, please vote abstain. And if we could unmute the phones. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Yes.
Opposed, no. Thank you. We can mute the phones. And we can close the poll. So the vote is 93% yes, 5% no, 2% abstain. So I declare a 2/3 vote on Article 4. Thank you. We'll go to Article 5. Recommended that the town vote to accept sections 3 to 7 inclusive of Chapter 44B of the General Laws, otherwise known as the Massachusetts Community Preservation Act, the Act, by approving a surcharge on real property for the purposes permitted by said act, including the acquisition, creation, and preservation of open space, the acquisition, preservation, rehabilitation, and restoration of historic resources, the acquisition, creation, preservation, rehabilitation, and restoration of land for recreational use, the acquisition, creation, preservation, and support of community housing, and the rehabilitation or restoration of open space and community housing that is acquired or created as provided under said act. That the amount of such surcharge on real property shall be 1% of the annual real estate tax levy against real property commencing in fiscal year 2022, and that the town hereby accepts the following exemptions from such surcharge permitted under Section 3C of said act. Property owned and occupied as a domicile by any person who qualifies for low-income housing or low or moderate income senior housing in the town, as defined in Section 2 of said act, $100,000 of the value of each taxable parcel of residential real property and $100,000 of the value of each taxable parcel of Class 3 commercial property and Class 4 industrial property as defined in Section 2A of said Chapter 59 of the General Laws. With that, I'd like to first recognize Melinda Collins, Chair of the Select Board. Could we put up her slides and promote her to a panelist? So Ms. Collins, you can put your camera on and then you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Melinda Collins, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 9, Chair of the Select Board. A community preservation fund is a tool to preserve our most unique natural, community, and built features in the face of development, and as we've seen in many Milton neighborhoods of late redevelopment. Property taxes traditionally fund the day-to-day operating needs of safety, health, schools, roads, maintenance, and more. But the CPA was enacted, and before that, there was no steady funding source to preserve community character through historic preservation and open space projects, or to improve the quality of life through outdoor recreational space projects, and by helping the most vulnerable residents we have, low to moderate income seniors, families, and individuals, to help them stay in town. While the Commonwealth calls this a surcharge, I think we all acknowledge that it is a tax. However, it's a unique tax that gives every property owner some breathing room because it exempts the first $100,000 of property value and completely exempts seniors and other households who qualify for low to moderate income housing. So in Milton, we talk a lot about helping seniors and other people. Seniors are of particular concern as Milton has a higher than average proportion of seniors, and that proportion is projected to reach approximately 25% by 2030. The real concern here, however, is that between 1999 and 2017, poverty among seniors rose from 4.3% to 9.2%. Not only does the CPA provide an exemption for them, but it also provides money to build affordable housing so that they can stay in Milton and we can keep our community strong and healthy. In addition, each year we do not enact the CPA, we're effectively sending our money to work on projects in other communities. Opportunities to create and improve athletic fields, protect the green spaces that give our community its distinctive character, improve access to parks such as Pope's Pond and Turner's Pond, and maintain and improve iconic historic town assets such as fire stations slip by and become more expensive every year. Since 2013, we've missed out on almost $9 million in CPA funding that could have helped pay for projects like the ones on the slide. This allows us to keep other taxes down and to protect operational budgets. And we can use other funding resources for projects and community needs not eligible for CPA funds. So how does it work? Well, procedurally, this warrant article represents the fullest sense of democracy that our town can exercise, because a yes vote on this article will let the voters of Milton decide the future of our athletic fields, parks, historic town buildings, and to decide on the importance of helping our low to moderate income seniors and households stay in Milton. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you, Ms. Collins. I see we have a couple of members who wish to speak. Mr. Thomas Callahan, you're recognized. If you could, you unmuted. There you are. Mr. Callahan, we can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, sorry.
No problem.
Good evening. My name is Tom Callahan. I'm from Precinct 4 and a member of the Affordable Housing Trust in the Housing Committee. But tonight, speaking as a voter, a taxpayer, and someone who has spent much of my career working on the three issues at stake here in this article. Currently, I am the volunteer chair of the steering committee of the statewide Community Preservation Coalition. In the year 2000, Governor Cellucci signed the Community Preservation Act into law. Today, 177 communities, over 50% of our cities and towns, representing over 62% of the state's population, have adopted CPA, and not one has repealed it. At least 6 more communities have it on the ballot this November. Milton can be number 7 tonight. As Melinda just said, CPA is unique. It has been used to save a critical farm in Boxford in North Andover that is used for equine assisted therapies for more than 300 children and adults with disabilities, including war veterans. It has restored historic buildings like the Abigail Adams birthplace in Weymouth and many more. And it has built affordable housing like the historic Ames Shovel Shop in Easton and the Cable Mills project in Williamstown, where my dad worked. Right now, many communities are assisting tenants and landlords struggling with this pandemic, but CPA is best when used to build permanently affordable housing that provides a home for seniors, young families, and others looking to afford shelter in one of the nation's most expensive housing markets. For 20 years, Milton has been on the CPA sidelines, while our neighbors have moved forward with exciting and attractive investments in their communities and their residents. My wife and I moved to Milton 25 years ago and raised our 2 daughters here. They went to Tucker, to Pierce, to Milton High, and played on our town fields. We love our town and we love our neighbors, but our daughters can't afford to live here now as young adults, and I'm sure that is true for many of you as well. CPA will help Milton become a better place, an even more welcoming place. We can be proactive with affordable housing, whether that be at Town Farm, or preserving the historic Kidder Library, or fire stations, or inserting ourselves into the East Milton 40B discussion, this time with money we can bring to the table. When I walk around Pope's Pond, I can imagine what a CPA investment could mean to improve the trails and access to a passive recreation area that is already used by a diverse cross-section of Milton. When I walk past the old Knights of Columbus building on Thatcher, I can see how housing close to transit would be a good solution to an eyesore. I'm sure you too have ideas, plenty of ideas on how you would spend these CPA dollars. That is the beauty of CPA. It is participatory budgeting at its best. 9 of our neighbors will get appointed to a local community preservation committee, and after substantial public input each year, we'll come up with a list of recommended projects. Your idea, your neighbor's idea, and town meeting will get to vote on that list each year. CPA works. Milton just needs to give our voters a chance. I urge a yes vote on this article to put the issue before the voters this November. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Callahan. Next, I'd like to recognize Mr. Sean Fahey. Mr. Fahey, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Sean Fahey, Precinct 9. I am speaking tonight to recommend a no vote on this article. And I have a few points that I would like to make in regard to my position on this. This is a forever tax. So it's a tax that'll never go away. It will only increase and accumulate over time. My second point is that it's really an unknown % increase for people. Because there are groups of exemption, and the way this is written, it's 1% of the tax levy. That calculated amount of 1% of the tax levy is going to be distributed to the people that are not in the exempt category. So none of us really know how much our tax is going to increase. It's certainly greater than 1%. We certainly know that just by a math calculation. I also feel we're at a very difficult time in the town of Milton in terms of the costs that we're facing. We have costs that are unavoidable. Certainly the fire station cost is unavoidable and we have to replace it. We've had plenty of conversation in regard to schools and capacity and costs that we're facing in that area too. We're asking our residents and our taxpayers to support very necessary costs that cannot be avoided. I feel we have too many other expenses that we need taxpayer support for right now. And for that reason also, I don't feel that this is a time for us to approve this. Lastly, I see everybody in the town that's a property owner as being a stakeholder. I don't believe at all we should pass any article that segregates those that are participating from those who are not participating. My mother is a part of the elderly community in town, so obviously I have an interest in her too. That being said, I think she should be included in the voters, and I don't believe that they should accept. So everybody should be a stakeholder in what the town approves or doesn't approve in terms of taxes. I don't believe this is good, although I do believe a lot of the intentions are good. I don't believe that the town should approve this and move forward. As I said, it's a tax. The value of it is not calculable for anybody that votes for it. We're asking for our residents and taxpayers to support other initiatives that are far more important, and everybody should be a stakeholder in whatever tax is assessed to us. So I recommend to the body a no vote on this article tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fahey. By the way, members have asked when there's a large number of hands being raised if I could read them off, because it sometimes indicates to you an indication of whether you'd like to speak. So coming up, we have Mr. McKay, Mr. Tracus, Ms. Friedman-Hanna, Ms. Christensen, Mr. Callahan. Once all the first speakers are done, Mr. Clark and Mr. Kelly. So I'll go to Mr. McKay. You're recognized. Just have to unmute, Mr. McKay.
Sorry about that. My name is Scott McKay, and I'm a Precinct 2 town meeting member and also chair of the Board of Park Commissioners. And I just wanted to echo what Melinda Collins had said, that our property taxes, as is with the general fund right now, really are earmarked and pay for the day-to-day operating needs of our community, from safety to health to schools to roads. And there is no real sustainable long-term funding source for preserving and improving our community's character and quality of life. I wanted to say that 62% of our state's population live in communities that get CPA funding at this point. And since its inception, 12,000 projects have come across other towns in Massachusetts. 30,894 acres of open space have been preserved, and they've approved and implemented 2,500 outdoor recreation projects. So my slant on this obviously comes from a Parks and Recreation standpoint, and I took a look at, over the past 10 years, just 20 other communities that are in the same size and demographics as ours. And towns would include Arlington, Easton, Hanover, Hingham, Lexington, Needham, Norwood, Randolph. And over those 10 years, 607 projects have been approved and moved forward. That's about 3 projects per town. And we're talking about community preservation, open spaces, recreational programming, recreational activities, outdoor activities, affordable housing, and historic preservation. So 3 projects per year. It's going to take the next 50 years to be able to fund all the things that we really need to accomplish in this community. So I don't think there's a lack of need for this type of funding. I just wanted to mention a few things that are outstanding now that our town, at least from Parks and Recreation standpoint, we're up against. In preparation for this year's capital process, we budgeted out the next 15 years of what our town assets look like. We're responsible for 120 plus acres of land in the town. And if we took an assessment of all of our assets, we figured that somewhere in the next 15 years, $10 million worth of rehabilitation and capital construction needs to occur to just maintain what we already have. That's not adding any additional projects. In this year's process, we asked for $650,000 to fund a couple different important, at least from our standpoint, important projects. One being the Lower Guile Field. It has had a substantial drainage issue for years. It cannot continue to maintain grass on the surface, and it's a real hazard for our folks who use it, including football, etc. We were not funded for that, and nor we were funded for the rehabilitation of Turner's Pond Walkway. Those are 2 projects that would fall under CPA. So I just want to also remind the body that CPA was passed by town meeting the last go around, and it failed in the general election. So again, if CPA is something that this body wants to go through, I would encourage folks to take this a step further and really help support CPA through the voting process. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Mr. McKay. Next, I'd like to recognize Ms. Friedman Hanna. Ma'am, you're recognized.
Hi, Karen Friedman Hanna, Precinct 2. I want to echo a bit of what Scott McKay just said. I think that this is a very important initiative that we not only vote to support tonight but that we actively vote to support in the town election and help the townspeople understand the benefit of this and the benefit of having a matching program like this where it's basically a $2 for every dollar that we need in this town for these initiatives. And it is something that we're constantly speaking of the importance of maintaining the beautiful buildings or the beautiful land or historic preservation, but this would allow us to have a means to do that more efficiently and more cost effectively. I understand that it is a tax burden. None of us, me included, wants to pay extra if we don't have to. However, the value that this is giving us in our town at really a very low cost amount, whether it's the 1% as is indicated, or as a speaker before this said, slightly more than that to make up for what others aren't paying. It is something that's crucial to keep the town moving in the right direction with its properties and with its buildings. So I strongly recommend a yes vote on this and bring it to the town's vote. This isn't for us to decide tonight. It's not, this isn't the end all be all. It's bringing it to the ballot. And if the townspeople don't feel that it's necessary, then they will have a say. All of the people who vote will have a say. And I think that that's the crucial part here, but I do strongly recommend that we speak to our constituents about the importance of this in each of our precincts and get this passed once and for all. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. By the way, we still have Ms. Christensen plus Mr. Kelly, Ms. O'Donnell, Mr. Tracus, Mr. Chinman, Mr. Sloan, and Mr. Callahan. So I'll recognize Ms. Christensen.
Cindy Christensen, Precinct 7. I actually talked to some of the people in my precinct before this vote because I wanted to know how they feel about this article. And of course, we all represent the people in our precincts and not just ourselves. So I reached out to 10 people. I heard back from 8. All 8 of them said, no, don't vote in favor of it. Some of the specific comments were, one person said town government is not transparent. No more taxes without improved transparency. The stormwater tax came up in 4 of the responses that I received. One person asked, is the stormwater tax actually going to only stormwater work? If yes, can you show me how? One respondent has, their family has lost half of their family income recently due to the pandemic. Another one of the 8 said that their family is having trouble making ends meet, and they're also worried about one of their wage earners could soon lose their job. One said that she had to pay to get her child to school safely and will not vote for another tax. 2 said taxes are already too high. One said, I don't think the select board makes good decisions about how it uses my money. When this came up, when Selectman Hurley first introduced it, at least the first time that I was in town, I actually supported it. I campaigned for it. I talked it up with the people that I represent because I do see the value in it. But now is not the right time. It's actually an insult, I think, to vote in favor of this, given what so many people in the town right now are going through. The insecurity of their finances, the worries that they're not going to be able to stay in Milton where their kids have developed community and friendship. So I'm asking you all to think about the people out there that you represent, that we should have all talked with before we come to this vote, and vote with me against this article. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Next, I'd like to recognize Mr. Brian Kelly. Mr. Kelly, you're recognized.
Hello. Yes, I'm in favor of this, and I think we should let the voters decide. If we had community preservation funds, we would actually probably have more options when we're trying to find a site for the East Milton Fire Station. CPA funds would give us just more flexibility. I think the main thing and the elephant in the room is what we haven't done as far as meeting our affordable housing goals over the years. And now it's coming to bite us with these developments that are coming up around town. And some people on this call may have one of these developments in their neighborhood being proposed, and they might be very unhappy about it. Well, the reason is because we didn't plan ahead. Our Community Preservation Act money can be used to help that issue. A lot of people don't know that the Henry's plant, the Henry's development, it was going to be rentals. And if it was rentals and had affordable housing, then all of those units would have counted toward the subsidized housing inventory. Right now, we're short about 250 units in the town of Milton. Well, remember, with the Henry's plant now, I think there's like 38 units and only 4 are affordable. But because they're ownership units, we only get credit for 4 units out of what we need. And the additional market units have to have 10% of those go on to the list. It's almost like a never-ending cycle. We add buildings to get some affordable housing, and it just keeps growing. But what I found out is if they're rental units, which that was supposed to be, all of the units would count toward the affordable housing goal. So if we want to prevent waking up one morning and finding out we're having a 100-unit building put beside our property, we need to start planning ahead. And with community preservation dollars, we might be able to do that. I would like to ask Kathleen O'Donnell from the planning board if she could just share with us one example where using the community preservation funds have been able to help in planning. I think she has an example where a community was able to use the money to help reach their affordable housing goals. And once they did that, they were able to prohibit unfriendly 40B developments. So if Kathleen could speak on that, I would very much appreciate it. And then you'll have to come back to me.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. Your telekinesis is amazing because Ms. O'Donnell is next up on our list. So Kathleen O'Donnell, you're recognized.
Boy, I love that ringing endorsement. Ms. Kathleen O'Donnell, Precinct 7, member of the Planning Board, and in full disclosure, I served on the steering committee of the Community Preservation Committee with Tom Callahan. I would like to remind that only the issue that we have before us tonight is whether or not we would let the town vote on this. We're not passing the Community Preservation Act here. We're deciding whether or not we're going to put it on the ballot where the rest of the town can decide. And I think that's a perfect place for it to happen. I'd also remind everybody that there are over 175 cities and towns that have adopted the Community Preservation Act, Boston being one of the most recent ones. All of the communities that surround us, Quincy, Braintree, Randolph, have CPA money and use it for all kinds of projects. You, in fact, every time you record a deed and a mortgage, pay into a community preservation fund, and you don't get to use that money. It goes to other cities and towns who get to use it. So this is a perfect opportunity for us. It's only a 1% surcharge. The maximum in the statute that's allowed is 3%. So this is a very modest request. I think that all of us, everybody I know is tense and worried about these times, but this fund provides the ability for capital improvements, for putting money in towards affordable housing. As Brian had pointed out, full disclosure, I represent many affordable housing trusts in other towns, and because they have CPA money, unlike ours, they contribute into projects. They either buy more affordability, they provide loans that make a project fundable, and we provide money that for state participation and all that sort of thing, and prevent 40Bs by making sure that we maintain the 10%. So it's a tool that would be very helpful to this town to protect the historic buildings that we all love, to really pay for some maintenance and some upgrades in our parks, which are being used all the time now because everybody's out and trying to quarantine and safe distances. And so I know Crane Field across the street from me has more people in it every day than I've seen in the last 25 years. So it's a way to provide some funding for those kinds of things that are, as Melinda Collins points out, are not operational, but are capital improvements and capital expenditures for the improvement of our town. And as I said, this is only a vote to put it on the ballot, and everybody in town would get to decide whether or not they want to go ahead with it.
Thank you, ma'am. We still have Mr. Tracus, Mr. Sloan, Mr. Chinman, Mr. Clark, Mr. Ebong, and then Mr. Callahan will get your chance again. So recognize Christopher Tracus.
Hi, everybody. Chris Tracus, Precinct 10. I am urging a no vote on this, and I'll explain why momentarily, but I'm also asking for some voluntary changes to be made. I'm not proposing amendments in the interest of time. It's just not what we need. Or I don't think what we need. I'm urging a no vote for various reasons. We're in the worst and quickest economic downturn since the Great Depression. On top of that, Massachusetts has the absolute highest unemployment rate in the whole country. People aren't working at all. They're working reduced hours. They're working from home. They're working reduced hours from home. People, some of them are getting by on the $600 a week. PPP loans, EIDL loans, they're struggling. I mean, this just isn't the time for something like this. People are also suffering medically. They're suffering and struggling financially. They're suffering and struggling mentally during all this. People don't like being at home. Some people like working from home. A lot of them don't. It's just not the time for this. Also, as far as Milton, there's a large amount of public land in Milton. Probably in Greater Boston, we have the most, because of the MDC, because of the Blue Hills. We've heard for years that Milton needs more property on the tax rolls, not less. This is going to take property off the tax rolls and have less money coming in. And our seniors are finding it harder and harder than ever to stay here. They're leaving. They're moving. They used to move to southern Florida, where at least they knew some people. That's become too expensive now. So they're going other places where they don't know people. Their children can't stay here. They can't afford it. Their grandchildren can't afford it. This is just going to make it that much harder to afford. And as far as voluntary changes that I'm proposing, if this goes forward, which hopefully it won't, but if it does, make it voluntary where anybody can opt out. I mean, if someone wants to stay in and pay it, fine. People, let people opt out. As far as, and also the wording that mentions Milton has missed out on approximately $8,765,632 in CPA funding. To me, that's a little confusing. Milton, it hasn't missed, it makes it seem like that would have been the state match. I mean, by my rough calculations, I'd say 6.5 million of that is money that Milton taxpayers did not pay out toward this, and maybe 2.2 million was a match from the state. So I'd like to see if the wording could be voluntarily changed to make that more clear. And then as far as the 6.5 million that was not paid out by Milton taxpayers, I mean, that money went to good things. I mean, it went to their living expenses. It went to improving their properties. Some of it might have been given to charity. Some of it might have, some of it was given to help fund their retirements. Those are all good things. So it's not like the money was just wasted on things that were no good. I mean, those are all good things that have helped these people. And I mean, it was voted down once before in 2013, so I wouldn't say there's enormous support for it. But, you know, just to conclude, I'd like to see if, you know, again, a no vote, but if not, just to see if the voluntary changes that I suggested and the voluntary wording changes that I suggested could be incorporated into this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tracus. I'd like to recognize Mr. Sloan.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Joe Sloan, Precinct 10. Building on something that Ms. O'Donnell said, you know, there's many people in town that honestly are feeling powerless in their neighborhoods as these impossibly sized 40B developments have been proposed. And I can give a perfect example of where a reserve of CPA funds could possibly offer a defense in a situation like this. And one of the multiple 40B proposals is a property on Blue Hill Avenue. Many people are aware of this. This is a tremendously historic property and gardens. Very, very famous landscape architect designed these gardens, and much has been done in the last few weeks. You may have read in the Milton Times about some of the efforts to possibly find a solution to this. But if the town had a reservoir of CPA funds, this would be a perfect example of how a town like Milton could possibly preserve a property like this and find a better and higher use of this property that would benefit the public good. You know, our former town administrator, John Cronin, reminds me of the efforts that went into acquiring the property that we now all enjoy around Pope's Pond, that conservation area, and other properties in town. And he also told me a few years back that it was unlikely that the town would ever be in a position to do something as wonderful as acquiring that property. So I offer that as an example. I encourage my fellow town meeting members to vote yes on this, to put this before the voters of Milton. I understand it's a tough time. I hope we're going to get through this and better days are ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sloan. By the way, a question came up in the Q&A on the concept of moving the question. Let me just explain what that means in our bylaws. It has two effects. It limits debate for any individual to 5 minutes, and it makes sure that no one can speak twice on a question unless they've already spoken, unless everybody else has spoken. So far, by my calculations, I don't think anybody tonight, only one person has spoken more than 5 minutes, and no one on this article has spoken for over 5 minutes. So I don't think it would have any effect. And we're already observing the rule of making sure that everyone's getting a chance to speak once before anyone speaks a second. If someone wishes to move the question, we can do that. I'm just telling you the practical effect of what it would mean on the debate tonight. With that, I'll recognize Mr. Michael Chinman. Mr. Chinman, you're recognized. You just have to unmute, sir. Mr. Chinman, you there? There you are. Do you wish to speak, Mr. Chinman? Tell you what, if you have a mic issue, I'll come right back as soon as we think you got it resolved. Why don't we go to Mr. Daniel Clark, sir, you're recognized.
Yes, thank you. Dan Clark, town meeting member, precinct 10. I just wanted to reinforce that I don't believe this body should be obstructionist to this going to a town vote, as previous speakers had mentioned. we're simply trying to take this to the voters to have everybody have a chance to say. I understand that we're a representative body, but I don't think polling 10 people and saying that therefore we shouldn't take this to the masses is doing our due diligence. Secondly, I think it's important to remember we're missing out on matching funds, and it has a real domino and rippling effect. If we're able to get funds, and we're looking, the town is looking for new ways to find revenue, and this is one of the very few options that is easily identified to be able to generate new revenue that can be used for really well-intentioned good for the town, and therefore we should be supporting this and trying to think about the future of how these things can help. There's been a plethora of options listed out there, and that's the great beauty of this, is that we will come together as a community to decide what these projects are.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. We still have Mr. Ebong, Coyle, Hine, and Johnson. So, and then Mr. Callahan. Mr. Chinman, you have resolved your unmuting problems. Can we recognize Mr. Chinman?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Welcome back.
Thank you. Michael Chinman, Precinct 2. You know, we are a representative town meeting, but no matter how good we are at being representatives, we cannot be better than the voters are themselves. And a point was made earlier that it would be an insult for us to approve this article. I think the insult would be to say to the voters, we do not trust you to decide this question. Speaking to 10 constituents is no substitute for letting all the voters vote. So I urge a yes vote.
Thank you, sir. Next, we'll go to Mr. Aqua Ebong. Mr. Ebong, you're recognized.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Please proceed.
Aqua Ebong, Precinct 4, town meeting member. I support the goals of the CPA, but do not support this article. I think it borders on the timing, the economic uncertainty right now. I think having anybody who supports this may not really be conscious, or maybe perceived as not being conscious of the current economic situation. I think the town has more pressing needs, the firehouse, the new school. I'm not sure this is the best time to be proposing new increase in taxes, especially if it's not an absolute need. I think the CPA, if in another situation, I would gain my support and vote. But for now, I think we should all vote no and revisit this at another time. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next, I'd like to recognize Mr. Jim Coyle. Mr. Coyle, you're recognized.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Moderator. Just one quick question. Is this 1% increase in taxes here, does that come into play with the 2.5% annual limit for tax increases? Is this, I'm not sure who would answer that, but could you address that, please?
Yes, I'll ask Ms. Collins of the Select Board if she could either answer herself, since this is their article, or tell me someone who can.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Excuse me. Right. Thank you. No, amounts generated by the surcharge are not subject to the levy limits of Proposition 2.5. Thank you.
Sorry, Ms. Collins, there was a little background paper noise. Could you just repeat for the audience so I can hear too?
My apologies. The amounts generated by the surcharge are not subject to the levy limits of Proposition 2.5.
Thank you. Okay. Next, we'll go to Mr. Douglas Hine. Mr. Hine, you're recognized. You just have to unmute.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Doug Hine, town meeting member, precinct number 2. I had a bit of a pause as to the use of the 35% matching fund number used. And from what I've been able to to research, that matching percentage may not be accurate to date. It appears that the amount of matching funds that states have doled out under the CPA has tended to decline over the years. Specifically, I was referring to some information from the Massachusetts Department of Revenue Division of Local Services. They came out with a statement in May 1st of this year saying that the estimate percentage of match would only be 11.2%. And that's roughly consistent with the match from last year. It does appear that at some point in time, the match percentage was much higher. In 2013, it appeared to be 50%. And that number has steadily gone down, due in large part to the number of communities who have joined this program. So I would urge a no vote on this for a number of the reasons that have been mentioned before, but especially in light of the fact that the match may not be, and I think the data indicates is not, nearly what was presented and appears to be at least a third, only a third of what was presented. I think that the benefits are not nearly as great to warrant putting this to a general vote. The comment was made by one of the other speakers saying that this is a forever tax. And I think that that statement is especially important in light of the fact that the matching funds may not be forever. And I think that the data indicates have diminished significantly over the years, so that while the amount of the match may dwindle, the tax itself will remain. And so I would recommend a no vote on this article.
Thank you, sir. Some other hands are up. So Mr. Johnson, Ms. Harrington, Ms. Lessing, Mr. Lessing, and then we have some folks that wish to speak again. So I'll go to Mr. Larry Johnson. You're recognized.
Yeah, hi, I'm rising this is Larry Johnson from Precinct 4. And I would like to just tell a little story about the town of Plymouth. It's where I grew up, and my mother is a town meeting member there. And every time I talk to her, she recommends that the town of Milton adopt the CPA. She said it's been amazingly transformative to that town. I mean, they were able to set aside 1,800 acres of open space. They created a new performing arts center. They've been able to restore numerous historic buildings. They restored the old courthouse as a town hall, and they were able to create more affordable housing. And so, of course, you know, with the CPA, most of this was paid by Plymouth taxpayers, but a good amount of the money was paid by us and by the rest of the towns of the Commonwealth. And I'm rising in support of this motion because, you know, it seems like if we're paying into that fund, we should be getting the benefit ourselves and not the town of Plymouth. And Plymouth, I should say, it's amazing when you go there. If you travel around, if you know the town, it's amazing how much this CPA has transformed this town. It's really just stunning. There's so many, the number of open spaces is just phenomenal. It's a much better town to live in now than it was, say, 10, 15 years ago before they adopted the CPA. So with that in mind, I just want people to be aware of just how much something like this can transform a town. And some of these things that we've struggled to pay for years would now be within reach because of the CPA. And because of those reasons, I think I strongly urge a yes vote on this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We'll go to Ms. Nora Harrington. Ms. Harrington, you're recognized.
Yes, Nora Harrington, Precinct 3. I join my previous neighbors in supporting this article. It seems like many of the arguments against moving this to a ballot is that we simply have other needs in Milton right now. And, you know, this article actually can support those other needs. In addition to, you know, helping to fund the acquisition, preservation, and rehabilitation of open space, you know, this money can also be used to fund the acquisition, preservation, and rehabilitation of historic resources. You know, buildings such as the Atherton Street Firehouse, which we need to do anyway. So I see this as a really complementary effort to our funding needs in Milton and a way to gain some state funds to help us do things we want to do anyway. to help us gain state funds to help us create more affordable housing so that we're not subject to these crazy 40B projects that keep coming along and forcing large-scale projects into our town that don't really benefit anybody here. So I strongly urge my fellow town meeting members to support this, and let's put this to the ballot, and let's educate the citizens of Milton about what this is about. I think that's where the decision should ultimately lie.
Thank you, ma'am. I'd like to recognize Andres Lessing. And if you could tell me, did I pronounce your first name correctly?
Yeah, that is correct. It's Andres Lasing.
Andres, thank you.
And I'm also rising in support of this article. And I wanted to just add a comment that I'm reading that other towns are actually now using the CPA funds to fund things like rent support for those that have lost their jobs. And so for those that oppose something like this, had this actually passed in 2012, we could have actually been helping our community. So again, it isn't only our parks, it really will help everyone in town. Thank you.
Thank you. And since everyone who wishes to speak once has done so, Mr. Callahan, you've been patient. Mr. Callahan, you're recognized again.
Great. Thank you again for recognizing me, Tom Callahan, Precinct 4. I just wanted to address a couple of items that previous speakers have mentioned. One is the issue of this being a forever tax. That is not accurate. After 5 years, the town's voters basically control this. They vote whether to adopt this or not, and they can vote after 5 years to increase the surcharge, decrease the surcharge, or repeal the surcharge. So it is totally within the control of Milton voters whether or not this tax stays on the books or goes away or is increased or decreased. No change in the surcharge can be made without the approval of Milton voters. So I think that's an important thing to mention. Also, I mentioned this the first time, but I'll just repeat this. Low-income homeowners are exempt, receive an exemption from this tax, so they do not have to pay. So anybody experiencing financial hardship and is below 80% of the area income for a non-senior, or 100% of the area median income for a senior citizen, will not have to pay this tax. They can receive the exemption, and and by the way, this tax will only start being collected if it was approved by the voters in July of 2021. Hopefully, the economy is a little better then. And then finally, there was a comment by a previous speaker about the state match. So because of the pandemic, we have a little bit of interesting guidance from the Department of Revenue. They have estimated, basically at the beginning of the pandemic in March, they estimated, the speaker was correct, 11.2% match. If everybody can remember back to the uncertainty of everything back when the state of emergency was declared by Governor Baker, DOR did an extraordinary thing and said that 11% match is based on every penny we've collected to date and no pennies more in the future. They assumed no additional revenue into the state trust fund that would provide the state match. So the 11% is extremely conservative. What we do know, and by the way, the state trust fund is funded by fees that you pay at the Registry of Deeds. Everybody across the state pays these fees. And basically, when you record a mortgage or other types of recordings at the Registry of Deeds, that's when you pay the fees. One of the things that hasn't been mentioned tonight is in response to the enormous popularity of CPA last year, the state legislature passed legislation that increased the size of those fees from $20 at the Registry of Deeds to $50. So 150% increase in those fees. that went into effect. Those fees started to be collected, those $50 fees as opposed to the $20 fees, in January of this year. So we have yet to see a full year of impact from that. The 30 to 35% estimate we think is a very conservative estimate, or I shouldn't say a very conservative, but a conservative / realistic estimate of what we can expect in future years based on the legislature's actions, and the fact that if you're in the real estate business at all, you know real estate activity has not slowed down. Some home sales have slowed down, but refinancings are through the roof. And every time somebody refinances, they pay the recording fees. So we know anecdotally, DOR is reporting increased revenue, dramatically increased revenue since the pandemic. And that's where the 30 to 35% estimate comes in. So thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you, sir. We have just 2 more speakers, and I think that may be it. So Ms. Christensen has asked again, Ms. Collins. Actually, before we, I see another first-time speaker. Why don't we go to, there's a couple more. Recognize Elizabeth O'Connor. If you could unmute.
Hi, apologies for that. I'm Elizabeth O'Connor from Precinct 9, and I rise in opposition to the language of this article that does not include our seniors who own property in the community and would like to be involved in the community and all of the things that that equate, and one of those things is paying your taxes. I was wondering why that language was included when seniors who are unable to pay their real estate tax can pay the tax upon the sale of the home. And we did actually reduce the interest rate on last town meeting to, I think it's 4% from 8%. The thing that really concerns me and why I rose for the first time to speak to this article is that it was stated that in the mere 10 years, 25% of the citizens of Milton will be senior citizens. And I wanted to also know if someone could speak to the financial specifics to give more of an example than what was shown in the town warrant related to, I think it was $82 on the average household per year based on the average value of a house. So those were 2 questions that I had. Why was the language relating to the seniors worded as it was? And the other one was to speak more specifically about the expected income to be received, say for the first year that this, if it was to be enacted, if this particular article passes tonight by town meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. O'Connor. With that, I'll recognize Melinda Collins to answer those questions.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Melinda Collins, Chair Select Board, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 9. The language here is per statute. We don't have the ability to tailor it other than to either adopt an exemption so that low and moderate income seniors don't have to pay this, which would help them meet their financial needs. That's what we're trying to do, help people who are really in need. And to that point, someone mentioned that had we had CPA, we could have used that for rental assistance. The town was able to find some money for rental assistance, but we perhaps could have done a little more. There are other provisions as well as creating affordable housing to help people. Also to provide housing counseling and foreclosure prevention services, and do this through funding nonprofits in town, and also helping to rehabilitate housing. And the other thing that we would be able to do with CPA funds is to make an appropriation to a municipal affordable housing trust fund, which we do have. And I wanted to reiterate something that Mr. Callahan said in the beginning. This money would be subject to participatory budgeting and really controlled by the CPA committee, not the select board. Thank you.
And Ms. Collins, the other question from Ms. O'Connor was, any guess on the income to the town in the first year?
Mr. Moderator, thank you for the reminder. We believe it's about $800,000. And if the voters decided to adopt the CPA, this would not go into effect until the following fiscal year.
Understood. Thank you. I see we have another first-time speaker, Mr. Joseph Reardon. Sir, you're recognized. Just need to unmute. Mr. Reardon, you're there?
Sorry, Mr. Moderator, technical difficulties.
Understood.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, and through you to my colleagues. I recognize the late hour, but Joe Reardon, Precinct 7, in addition to being a town meeting member, I am the representative appointed by the Select Board to the Norfolk County Advisory Board, and just wish to speak for a moment to the remarks about the Registry of Deeds. Mr. Callahan has mentioned the fact that transactions at the Registry of Deeds, which are available for view at norfolkcounty.org and also at norfolkdeeds.org, will share information regarding the tremendous number of refinancing of mortgages that have occurred in the county. That has created a tremendous amount of income for the county, but also for the CPA. In addition, the state has done a tremendous job of supporting the CPA. I could say, Mr. Moderator, that the County of Norfolk does in fact have over 2/3 of the county seats, the county towns and cities supporting the CPA already in the program, including each of the other towns in the county that touch the town of Milton. So the town of Milton is in fact an island in the CPA in Norfolk County. I could say that the amount of money that could come into the town, and Chair Collins recognized this, $800,000, of which the match is like leaving money on the table if you don't take advantage of it. I could also mention to my conservative friends who have spoken tonight that the act that was signed to start the CPA was established by a Republican governor, Governor Cellucci, in 2000. So the CPA is a bipartisan thought that arose out of the need for protecting others, protecting our land, protecting our historical places, protecting our recreational space, and in fact, helping those who need assistance with paying their rent, affordable housing, and things that we really need here. What I would suggest, though, having said that, is that this is not something that should be decided tonight. It can't be. It's something that should be decided by the voters. So at almost 11 o'clock at night, I would suggest to my colleagues that we consider putting this to the voters by voting to put it on the ballot and allowing the discussions and the considerations of our voters and our neighbors, including the fact that there are exemptions and there are ways that we can look at this differently from other communities. 1% versus 3% as an example is a way that we could move forward on this and hopefully get to bed at a reasonable hour. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you, sir. I see no other hands, first-time hands up. The only hand up is now Ms. Christensen. Ms. Christensen, you're recognized. And after this, I think since I see no other speakers, we'll go for the vote after Ms. Christensen. So thank you.
It's not being an obstructionist to reach out to and listen to the residents who I represent. Yes, I reached out to only 10. 8 responded. All 8 asked me to vote no. How many did my fellow town meeting members talk with before this vote? Like others, I believe in giving voters the right to vote. However, this time for this article, there is an implicit statement that a yes vote makes. I encourage you to think about, with some compassion, what your yes vote means to those who are worried about their finances and their future here in Milton. There are consequences to putting this on the ballot now. It's not the time for that to happen. Please vote no.
Thank you, ma'am. Okay, with that, we will put up the polling question. This is just a majority vote. All those in favor of the motion before the body, please signify by voting yes. All opposed, vote no. All abstaining, please vote abstain. Please remember to click submit at the end. Could we unmute any on the phone? All those in favor on the phone, please signify by saying yes.
Yes.
Opposed, no. We can close the, mute the phones. And I think that, okay, so we have the vote. The yeses are 75%, the noes are 24%, the abstains are 1%. So the motion carries with a majority vote. With that, folks, we have 3 more articles to go, and it is actually 5 more articles to go. It's 10 minutes to 11. I'll entertain a motion to recess in the Q&A. So moved. Is there a second? There's a second. Can we just put up the poll real quick? All those in favor, we'll close this vote. All those in favor of recess, please signify by saying yes. Opposed, no. Abstain, click abstain. Please click submit. You can unmute the phone. In favor of recess. All those on the phone in favor of recess?
Yes.
Opposed, no. I think we can close the poll. And the motion carries by 94% to 4% to 1%. Thank you very much. We're back here 7:30 on Thursday night, July 30th. By the way, I appreciate all the homework that many of you did. I can't name everybody, but Mr. Corcoran, Mr. Mullen, Mr. Whiteside, numerous people did their homework on these articles in advance. And thank you for writing these things down and being so diligent and careful about it. It really does help all of us to try to put a good town meeting on for you and make it all clear to the voters. Thank you, and we will see you on Thursday night.